Hi, folks. Nathan Pierce here with Family Protection Ministries. There's a bill, AB 957, that is a dangerous threat to the family in California, and I want to tell you a little bit about what this bill is and why it's a threat. So, 957 actually is dealing with the context of a custody dispute about a child. So, if there is a family that is made up of a husband and a wife with a child, and the husband and wife are fighting over custody of that child, or the two parents, let's just say, of that child are fighting over custody of that child, then the court gets involved to determine what that custody arrangement is going to be. In the case of 957, the bill is designed to put certain parameters or requirements on the court as they make this decision about custody. And in this case, the requirement placed on the court is saying the judge must take into consideration certain things. And there's a code that's already written that governs how the judge is to make this decision, what he has to take into consideration when he's making this decision. Now, this bill requires that something be added in there, and it has to do with the perspective of the parents of the child. Looking at the two parents, the judge must consider a variety of things, but the judge must specifically also consider what the parent's perspective is of the child's gender identity. And so the important part here is that the court is to take into consideration the beliefs of the parent when the court makes a determination about who gets custody of a child. So this can play out in a lot of different ways if you look at how this would ultimately end up impacting things in the future. But let's just look at the context of what's happening here and what this bill actually does right now. And then we can get to that next. First of all, you have parents of a child that are arguing over custody. So you already have a situation where there's a family mixed up with the court because of a divorce or because maybe they were never married. There's a family problem here. It's not that this is just an average healthy family that is all of a sudden taken to court by somebody and now there's the custody of the child up in the air, up for grabs. No, we're talking about a situation where the parents are already in court fighting over a child. And that's where 957 comes in to make the requirement that the judge consider the parents' beliefs about the gender identity of the child. So we already have a mess. This is a family situation that's a mess. It's a disaster. And it's a very sad situation. These situations exist here in California. We know they do. And so this bill makes it a requirement that the judge take into consideration whether or not the parent essentially agrees with the child about their gender identity. Now, this could ultimately play out as a disaster in terms of a family that is, maybe they never were a functional family, but practically speaking at this point, the judge is to take into consideration these things because the authors of this bill want to promote or allowed to be promoted non-traditional or non-biblical gender identity values. And so when we look at this issue, we have to recognize that there's a significant threat to biblical gender identity principles and biblical family principles of parents being together and in unity over basically the concept of what is gender and what is a family. And so we need to recognize that this bill is, first of all, dealing with something that's already in court. It's dealing with a mess in a family situation that's already got trouble, and it's interjecting this new legal requirement into the judge's opinion when granting custody of a child. So it does have long-term implications as well. Those long-term implications, when you look at, well, how does this relate to other family situations? It doesn't immediately impact the average healthy family. However, this kind of goes along with what we've been saying about other bills, where we're looking at a trajectory here of how does the government interject into a family situation, into a parent-child relationship, and say the government has authority over what a parent should believe or be able to teach their child or enforce in their own home in terms of biblical principles, biblical values, specifically here relating to gender, gender identity, gender roles, definition of family, definition of man, woman. This whole picture is problematic because you have the government interjecting its view of all of these things into the relationship between a parent and child, and saying, parent, if you do not agree with the government on these issues, then you are not in the same position of authority with your child as you would be if you did agree with us. So that sets up a trajectory of separating the authority over children from parents because of a differing view, a difference in beliefs between a parent and the government. And the government is saying, parent, if you do not agree with us on these gender identity and family principle issues, then we will take your authority away from you, and we will take that, it will become our authority, and we will give it to whom we will give it to, and you are left to have your beliefs by yourself. And so this trajectory is not a good one. It is a dangerous, it is an anti-biblical, anti-God direction for the state to go. And it is the government interjecting its belief system, its view of family, of man, of woman, of gender into an individual family situation. And it's allowing the government to take a responsibility, take a authoritarian position over a family situation where a parent and another parent are in disagreement about something, and they're getting the government to come in and settle their disagreement. And this law is saying the judge has to take this into consideration when he is deciding how to settle this dispute between a husband and a wife or a father and a mother. It sort of starts with a mess, but it also creates a new mess by telling the people of California that the government's position of what the government's view of gender roles and identities is, that view, the government's view, is the top view, is the important view, is the ruling view, and so it is what makes the decision. And that's a dangerous place. That's a dangerous place for all of us to be. It's not going to stop here in California either. You see this kind of thing popping up in other states as well. You see a bill up in Washington that has already moved in this direction and has already passed their legislature in dealing with foster children. And it's really dangerous. You've seen it, little bits and pieces of this throughout the country. We need to voice our opinions on this and say what God says about this, because if we don't, there will be no line, and it will just continually be getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. We need to stand firm on this. We need to preach truth about this issue because it matters. So, We need to recognize that there's a trajectory here that's dangerous. We need to recognize that we need to take responsibility and voice what is true because it's being left out of the discussion. And we need to make sure that we are doing our part in both getting involved in elections, getting involved in the legislative process, and making sure that the truth is heard there, and also that we would make sure that we're engaging in our culture around us to preach truth there, because that is what ends up in the public sphere and in the legislative sphere. So, AB 957, dangerous bill. Please make sure that you call and write your legislator on this bill. It's now in the Senate, and so I would encourage you to call or write your California state senator on this bill today. Thank you.